What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre. This is HoopIntellect, and welcome back to the channel and the HoopIntellect podcast. Now, the plan with this is to drop about weekly, covering current draft and scouting topics first, but also things related to the NBA and bringing on guests for conversations and interviews to help bring insight into all that. And that's including people in the media, players, coaches, everything in between. That's kind of the ultimate goal in the direction that I want to take this podcast. Now, if it does take a minute to find a consistent day to upload or figure out how I want to package this in terms of clips and how it goes out on social media and all that while still keeping the same substance, and that's just kind of going to be part of the process. But yeah, I'm kind of figuring out how I want to put that out on the fly. Now, the audio will also be out on all platforms, so your Spotify, your Apple Podcasts, all that. So those of you who are interested in listening to the audio only, that'll be available as well. Now, one more thing before we get into the bulk of this episode. Those of you watching on YouTube see this beautiful shirt that I've got on. This and a few other colors will be dropping very soon. I'm aiming for Black Friday, so mark that on your calendars if you guys are interested. But yeah, I'll be posting it on socials and the YouTube community page, so you won't miss it, and you'll be able to get there from HoopIntellect.com as well for those of you who are subscribed to the Substack and have been over too. But yeah, I think they're great quality. There's something I actually spend my own money on, which was the biggest issue with some of the stuff that I had tried to put together in the past. Those of you who have really been around, there was one point that I actually kind of promoted the possibility of them dropping, but I didn't have any of the logistics together. I was just excited to put a shirt together. But this is official. We're very close to being able to drop and everything. So Black Friday, that's the aim. If you're interested, definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, getting into things now that we've got those out of the way. In this episode, we'll talk some first impressions and standouts of this young college basketball season. Now, ordinarily, we won't talk about as many players in a single episode as we do in this one, but there's just a lot that I wanted to get to that's happened so far. And yeah, the beginning of the year, you got a lot of new information, different things going on. So definitely want to be able to touch on some of those things that are going on a little bit more frequently or in the moment than we have in the past, waiting for the first look or waiting for that first board. But starting with the guy that has the most eyes on him in this class, that's obviously Cooper Flagg. I'm not 100% sure what the greater public perception is of him right now. I'd imagine those late game turnovers against Kentucky in one of the biggest games of the year so far, than Champions Classic, has had a lasting impression, but I think he's been as advertised. We talked a ton about how talented this Duke group is, and it still is, from Malawaj to Knipple to even the older or the returning guards in Foster and Proctor, and even the guys on his bench, and down to Isaiah Evans and Darren Harris. But Cooper Flagg is currently leading the team in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. And I don't think anyone would say that he's put together a truly amazing game yet either. You see the type of supreme defensive feel that he has, the playmaking on that end, and versatility on a game-by-game basis. And then offensively, he's continued to show growth as a creator. He's been extremely comfortable initiating offense and running pick and rolls, and that's actually one of his most common play types right now, which I don't think a whole bunch of people would have necessarily projected early on. He did a ton of creating for Duke against Kentucky specifically. Now, that was partially to the detriment of the team. I just don't think they really had enough offensive flow in that game. That goes more on Shire than it does any singular player. I think Caleb Foster probably deserves just a slight portion of that blame, but that's more game plan stuff. I think Flagg is really right on schedule in a lot of ways. Now, he's not shooting the ball well at all, 22% from three, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on, especially knowing who he has been in the past and what it's taken for him to, become a serviceable shooter in the latter parts of his high school career. And again, I do think that he does still have room to grow as a perimeter player, even though he has gotten better. I think that just more highlighted what is one of his limitations right now as a 17-year-old. But in terms of long-term potential or it being a huge roadblock for him, I wouldn't say that that's the case yet. We'll see over a bigger sample size. But yeah, I think that he's just getting started in a lot of ways. I think we're going to see some pretty special performances from him here soon, and I'd anticipate he could possibly separate himself over these next several weeks and months if he continues to build on what he has so far and, shoots it a little bit better from the floor. Now, a guy that has had arguably the hottest start of any freshman in the country is BYU's Egor Demin. I actually mentioned him on Sam Vecini's podcast as a guy who could sneakily get into top 5 conversations just because of his skill set as a 6'9" creator. And to this point, that has at least been the case. Now, whether or not that maintains is going to be dictated upon, him going up against some better competition and just maintaining the play that he has to this point. But it would be hard to have watched what he's done so far and not come away extremely impressed just on the surface. He's been absolutely dynamite as a passer in making quick decisions, coming off of ball screens. He's versatile in the type of passes he can make, whether it be a touch lob pass off a live dribble or a pocket pass or the skip to the corner. Like, he's had it all. There's actually one play where he's operating in the middle of his zone that's been one of my favorites early on. And just the way that he's able to read the help defense and immediately deliver a pass out to the corner where he just kind of has this innate feel of where the ball needs to be and where it needs to be delivered. That was something I kind of expected him to do first and foremost, but it has still been good to see in practice. And then I would say most importantly, he's just shot the ball extremely well and has been off the catch, and he's also even punished a few teams in the pick and roll from deep. And in addition to that too, I think his finishing and control as a driver has been very good in comparison to some games that I've seen from him in the past where, things could go awry depending on, the direction he had the ball in his hands and against a little bit more physicality. But I think he's done a good job there based off of who he's played. So right now he looks like a potential top 5 pick, definitely somebody that's going to be somewhere in that vicinity if things hold on that first board. But yeah, I'm really interested to just see how he continues to grow throughout the year. Oh, I would also add his defensive play has also been pretty impressive to me. I think he's done a great job in help. He's always just been in the area in the right spots and making plays, averaging 2 steals a game, nearly 1 block. Been physical in the moments that he's needed to. So I would add that as something that has stood out to me as well. But yeah, I'm really just interested to see how he continues to grow and evolve over the course of the season. And again, against tougher competition, especially in the Big 12 and on some of those nights where maybe his teammates aren't hitting, or maybe they're going to force him to try to beat them as a jump shooter. Can he take on that challenge? Does he take on that challenge willingly? Those types of things, and yeah, everything in between. So let's head over to Rutgers and their star freshman duo. I've liked the start of the season from Dylan Harper. He's played a few games, and I think he's only going to continue to ascend with Ace Bailey back on the court. Dylan has done a great job of scoring, balancing scoring, and making plays for his teammates so far. I think that we've seen a lot of what he does well early in this season, whether it's just using his craftiness and size to, get into the paint, take contact, get to a few pull-up jumpers, play with great pace in the pick and roll. All that stuff has been there pretty consistently. He's lived at the line. He's finishing well at the bucket at 77% overall and 73% in the half court on a good volume of looks in both of those spaces as well, which has been good to see. Again, all of this, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but all of this is not the greatest competition for a lot of these guys who are looking to be at that next level on the NBA. But, we're just taking things at first value and first impression. So keep that in mind for those of you who are only focused on coming to complete conclusions. Right now, that's not what any of this is. And then I think the decision making has been there. The assists in those first couple games weren't super high. I think they left a lot of points on the board, but he wasn't forcing it. He wasn't just making a bunch of unnecessary plays or anything like that from my vantage point. So you match that with what has been solid defense as well, and I think that he's off to a great start. 21, 5, 4, 58% from the field, over 30% from 3. The shot is, again, a question for him, but he's well on track to be in that top 3 conversation. Now over to who is probably the most divisive and also highlight worthy prospect in this class right now, and that is his teammate Ace Bailey. I thought he had a pretty good debut. We saw the tremendous shot making flashes for a guy his size. We saw some of the explosiveness around the bucket and finishing in transition, and then some of the defensive activity in flashes as well. Now, sure, his flaws were also apparent. At least for me, I expect to see some of those things, but I'm not 100% sure why people are so interested in like reaching a conclusion in his literal first game and first 10 minutes of his college career. Like I said on the first board, it's almost become personal at this point, whether it is directed at him or just kind of the idea that he's KD because he can make tough shots. I understand being frustrated with that as like a opinion, or because, you know, it's not necessarily rooted in the most solid philosophy or whatever. But again, I think it's just kind of weird. For me personally, I don't feel like giving a dissertation on each player's flaws every time that they do something impressive. Like, is that one play where he makes a turnaround somewhat emblematic of some of his issues? Sure. Is it also a great reflection of his ability to make extremely difficult shots look very easy for him and get to his spots easily? Yes, that's also the case. But I thought it was a good debut for him overall, and I'm curious to see how much other stuff that he needs to work on comes to fruition throughout the year. Trey Johnson is another big-time shot maker in this class and has been on an absolute tear to start the season. Really unreal in a lot of ways. Been lethal in transition. He's capable off movement. He's done it off a baseline out of bounds. He's done it in the pick and roll and off the dribble as well. And all really within the flow of Texas's offense. He hasn't done too much or like had this super high usage in terms of how much he's touching the ball. I've been extremely impressed by who he's been so far. I've also thought, in addition to that, he's played solid defense. I think he's been a solid playmaker as well. He's taken care of the ball, made good decisions, again, played within flow. Now, the thing with Trey coming into the year, and it has continued to be the case so far, and is why I'm just slightly worried, especially because he's shooting such an obscene percentage right now. He's only got 5 half-court rim attempts so far out of his 37 total shot attempts in the half court. That's going to be something to watch. I think he has done a good job of attacking and finishing on those few opportunities that he's had, especially in semi-transition. But again, a 6'5", 6'6"-ish guard who has such a heavy reliance on some of the tough shots or just shots from the perimeter, you know, you do have to ask certain questions, especially for a guy who isn't like a true lead guard. He hasn't at least been that to this point as a playmaker. So that would be my biggest question from what he's been to this point. But again, it's hard to complain when you've seen somebody put on a shot-making display the level that he has, and has also been at least decent to good in the surrounding and supporting areas of his game as well. So very interested to see how Trey Johnson continues to grow and develop from this point. VJ Edgecombe was a member of, or is still kind of a member of, that consensus top 5 that had been there coming into the season. He has not had the greatest start, but I still think a lot of the pieces that make him have been there. Right now, he's averaging 11 points, nearly 8 rebounds, about 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks, 2 turnovers. The shooting splits have not been great at about 37, 18, 70. But again, he has done a lot of the things that we've expected from him in a lot of ways, whether it's, you know, just the energy and athleticism that he's played with. He's made some ridiculous plays there, whether it's dunking on Mark Few's son at the end of that game. Why on earth did he jump? He's also had the collision with Adu Thiero in the air, chase downs, lobs, all that stuff that is just absolutely ridiculous. He'd be one of the top athletes in the NBA as soon as he gets drafted. Now, I don't think that he's like elite of that level, like a Min Thompson level, but he's definitely in that upper echelon in the world playing basketball right now. And I think, you know, the other things that he's done well, I think he's done a good job of executing off the ball, finishing those lobs and executing sets there. I think he's done a good job as a cutter. Defensively, again, making an impact there, making plays, nearly 4 stocks a game already, or actually over 4 stocks a game. That has been positive as well. The big thing for him right now, he's shooting just 17% from 3 for 17 total. That's going to have to change. Again, we've talked about how much of an emphasis is going to be on that because he hasn't been a big-time playmaker, and if he is more of a wing or play finisher, an off-ball guy, he's going to have to shoot it at a high clip that hasn't been there so far. And again, adding to that, I want to see, can he or does he ever get comfortable as a ball handler and creator as the year goes on? That's going to be a big question for him to answer as well. But overall, I think he's done a lot of what you've come to expect from him and what makes him such an intriguing player, because this is kind of his floor and his baseline. If those other things start to happen, like his shot, or he starts to become more comfortable attacking the bucket or running pick and rolls, that's when you start to see the potential star level player arise out of him. Oh, also, I would add to this, his playmaking has been very impressive. The connective passes, making the extra pass in transition, some stuff coming downhill in that Arkansas game was really impressive. So all that has been there as well. Now moving on to a couple more Duke guys, we've got Con Knipple, who I think has been great outside of that Kentucky game. He was 5 for 20 in that game. I think some of the issues that he could have were there in terms of dealing with better athletes in rim protection and being able to finish more consistently. That was not the case in that game, and it kind of hurt them in some ways. He also just was off as a shooter, and I think if he just makes one or two more of those threes, that game is completely different, and that's what you would normally expect from him. He's an elite guy in that respect. He can do it off movement, he can do it in several different ways, and also be able to attack a closeout and make a play. That's kind of what makes him such an intriguing prospect. He doesn't turn the ball over or make too many mistakes either. So I've been impressed by what he's done, again, outside of that game against Kentucky, and then also, a few defensive questions and just athleticism. He's been a huge part of their success, and his teammate Kaman Maluwach has clear top 10 upside to me. I think this draft isn't super deep in terms of true centers, but I still think that he's done enough already and coming into this year to be looked at as the best big that it has to offer. He's got great rim protection instincts. He's been impressive in terms of his improvement in positioning, both in the pick and roll and also just in terms of hunting blocks and those types of things. I think that he's still rough around the edges in some ways in terms of like being able to stay down, and he's gonna need to cut out those easy fouls and make a few better decisions. But overall, I've been impressed by just his growth, and it seems like he's maturing and learning the game as the games go on. And then on the offensive end, I think he's done a pretty good job of finishing plays and just finding ways to make himself available for his teammates. Now, hopefully he stays healthy. He's had quite a few knick-knack injuries from the hand coming into the year to the cramping that kept him out against Kentucky. He might be nursing a toe injury. So you want to see him get fully healthy and not have to deal with that stuff. But yeah, I've liked his start quite a bit. Hasn't been playing the game super long. I think you look at how someone like Derek Lively started off his college career and compare it with this, which they're obviously two different prospects. But I think Maluwach has been really good. I get into a few more of these freshmen at depth before we get into some of the other guys. All of them went to Montverde, actually. So we've got Asa Newell out of Georgia. His defensive versatility and helm side rim protection has been super impressive. He's averaging 2.5 blocks a game. He's up to around 8 rebounds, which was somewhat of a question of his. How well could he finish possessions and how viable could he be as a 5 or just somebody who could provide value there. That's been there. Offensively, there are still some questions, but he's been solid as a play finisher. He's done a good job in transition, and I think that he's personally done a really good job of clearing lanes for drivers and figuring out how to add value on the interior, which is great, because as of now, there's still some questions about like where he slots in best. But that stuff has stood out to me as him continuing to grow and evolve in a big way. The shot is still a work in progress, of course. He's 1 for 11 from 3 on the season there. He's at about the 50s at the free throw line. So that's going to need to look different by the end of the year to have full confidence in him. But I liked his start to the year. He probably won't be a guy who gets a ton of buzz just in terms of like raw numbers or highlights. He doesn't have the flashiest game, but he's someone I think a lot of teams are going to be interested in drafting. Again, like I said before, keeping in Montverde, Derek Queen out of Maryland had one of the best statistical debuts of the last several years. He had 22 and 20 with 2 blocks in 26 minutes, and that's great. And he's managed to only build on that game and actually deliver more impressive stretches, even in the games where the numbers didn't look quite as loud. I've been long impressed by his handle for a big guy, but that's continued to get even better. He's got elite footwork for anyone that size on the planet, really. The passing hasn't been quite as elite as some of the film that he showed at Montverde, but if you've seen him again in the past, he has that gear to really take over games in that aspect. Now, I'm interested to see how he converts from 2 and how consistently the shot can fall. The defense is still a question mark in some ways, even though I thought he was pretty good against Marquette. I'm just not 100% sure where he guards at the next level right now, so that'll be the main thing to kind of discover. But man, again, I always come back to like a lot of these players. It's like it's hard to watch him and not be really intrigued by who he could be, even with some of the obvious and conventional questions that might still be there for him. But you know, he's a guy who's been really impressive to start. And then the last Montverde guy with a Conference Freshman of the Week award, also all 3 of those guys plus Flagg have had one already. That's Liam McNeely out of UConn. There's not really much to talk about with him, as strange as that could sound. Well, I mean, I guess not. Let me not say that. There's still details about his game that we'll cover throughout the year. But so far, he's done about everything that you could have asked or expected from him. He's a quintessential Hurley freshman, in my opinion. He's just one of those shooters who you think is making it every time. He's done a solid job of making a play in the limited time that he's had to. And on the other end, I've liked his defense positionally. I still wonder what that looks like one-on-one and in space because New Hampshire had a little to say about that. But so far, he looks like a guy who can come in and play a role in the NBA in the near future. And that's kind of the expectation that I have for him as a player overall. So I think it's been a solid start for Boogie Fland. He's shown the great speed and upside as a playmaker, and I think he's just scratching the surface for who he can be as a player, both this year and in the future. He had that weird game against Baylor, working against that zone, but he still found a way to produce. He's had 17 assists and just 5 turnovers in 3 games. They're playing right now, so that'll change. And when this comes out, he'll have another game under his belt. But 17-5 is great. He's shooting 38% from 3. He's had moments as an absolute pest at the point of attack defensively, and he's made guys lose it picking up in the full court. So I think that's a separator for him as a smaller guard, and you add that to what he can do as one of the most dynamic playmakers in this class, and really just starting to get comfortable as they define roles, and he's able to figure things out. Over to Illinois, Kaspers Yakuchonis, even though the stats haven't been great, I think he's been decent. He's been an absolute machine as a playmaker, dishing out over 7 a game and creating countless more opportunities than just that. He's also been solid defensively, containing and navigating screens from what I've seen. The big thing for him, though, is he can't take just 3 shots a game and maximize his potential as a ball handler. He's gotten to the line and taken a good number of 3s, so it's not super concerning from like a very small sample standpoint, but that's what I'm looking for going forward. I still think he's got some questions in his athleticism and how he handles better size as a creator, but he's a supreme playmaking talent for sure. So his teammate Will Riley had the ridiculous opening game against Eastern Illinois with 31, 7, and 3 and hitting 5 out of 6 threes. He's continued to show pieces of that throughout and been pretty active on the glass, but he hasn't been quite as effective since. I don't know that 100% matters to me in terms of like just making a first impression, because a lanky wing at a legit 6'9" who can shoot it, make a play, and be solid defensively is going to have obvious appeal. So we'll see where he goes from here. One thing I noticed from him is the struggles on the mid-range pull-ups. He's just 1 for 7 on the year there. He's 3 for 3 from 3 though. But yeah, I'm ultimately just curious to see how he develops as the competition gets tougher and what the minutes look like. But I like what he can do. Now, LeBaron Feiline is the freshman I see joining a lot of boards here soon. 6'4" guard at Bama. He's a downhill bullet who has a really unique style with the ball in his hands. He's a natural playmaker and has versatility as a passer. He's got the upside to run offense and still find a place to fit in within it. And he's done all of this while the shot hasn't been there much until the Purdue game. So I've been impressed by that. He's looked like one of the better players on his Bama team already. So I think he determines a lot of their success and should be well into first round conversations if he continues in any slight capacity as he has so far. Kenan Catchings hasn't shot the ball well at all beyond the first game where he went 4 for 11 from 3, but I still have a solid amount of confidence in his skill set. He's a big wing, who's a very good help defender. He can contain on the ball and has that type of 3-and-D complementary skill set that's easy to see the appeal for. Now, again, he's going to have to make more shots over the course of the year. He's gotten a good deal of looks, but if and when that happens, I think he could be the second of two one-and-done players on this BYU team. Now, Arizona State's Josan Sanon had one thing that was you could pretty much count on coming into this year, and that was getting buckets. He's been on a roll since going to the bench and was spectacular against Grand Canyon in a pretty competitive matchup between those two teams. 6'5" shot making guard. That's kind of what he does first and foremost, and we'll see how the rest of his game develops, but he looks poised to only continue growing on the offensive end. Now, these next couple freshmen we've talked about a lot coming into the year, but they haven't been the most impressive. The first is Drake Powell at a UNC. Some of those fears about him being timid offensively have been there. He wasn't ready for that Kansas game at all. Looked out of place in a lot of moments there. He had just 7 points on 3 for 12 shooting in his first 2 games, so he's a definite work in progress on that end of the floor. Now, I still think he has great upside as a defensive wing, and he should have enough to be valued by NBA decision makers this year. I still think his feel as a passer is pretty underrated. He's got a great motor. I think the game against American, where he had 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, 7 points, that's the type of performance that you would probably expect from him, at least from what he's shown. So I liked seeing that. But yeah, we'll see how he looks these next couple months and where he goes from here. I'm not completely out on him by any stretch of imagination, but that's not exactly top 10 level production, especially in this class. Jaleel Bethea has been productive, but he's played just about 15 minutes in every game this year. I'm interested to see if his role will be even large enough to think about one and done and do anything beyond just being kind of a microwave scorer. 29 points in 43 minutes of game time, even against that lower level comp, that's a productive start. So now getting into some of the upperclassmen and returners who have been impressive for one reason or another. There's a longer list than even those guys that we'll talk about in this video or in this podcast, but these are some of the ones that have caught my eye most. The first one is Nick Clifford out of Colorado State. He was a draftable guy, in my opinion, last year, but the way that he has come back and, shown improvement all around, but the comfortability with the ball in his hands and the ability to make plays for his team has been great to see. He's shooting a solid volume of threes on top of that, still a tenacious rebounder, somebody that has that perfect complementary type of game. And even as an older guy, I think he'll potentially get first round interest if he can continue to be as big a threat as he's been in a bigger role, knowing what he can do in a smaller one already. So he's been impressive, had that career high 31 points against Tennessee State and was amazing in that game. So really good start for Nick Clifford. Mackenzie Mbako has been one of, if not the best sophomore returner. Of course, a lot of this comes down to just hot shooting. So in the grand scheme of things, it may not mean that much for his ultimate NBA stock, but I still think the comfort and poise that he's shown on offense has been several steps above from who he was last year, but even especially at the beginning of last year. His defense has also been solid. Never going to be a huge threat on the perimeter just in terms of foot speed, but he's been better. And again, when you're putting up about 22 points and 8 rebounds on 83% true shooting as a 6'9" wing, that's going to get you some praise from a lot of places, and especially over here on a pretty frisky Indiana team. UAB's Yaxel Lindeborg is definitely a guy to watch. He's had an impressive start to the year as a wing/forward at 6'9", who is just a solid connective player. He's got great energy. He makes plays defensively. He's a solid athlete. He can handle it a little. He's a decent shooter. I wasn't the biggest fan of his a season ago, just in terms of him being like a clear draftable guy. I was more caught up on the shot, but man, he's looked draftable. He's looked way more than that, and I actually had that game that they were playing on earlier before recording this, and at that point he had 6 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. So yeah, he's going to be a guy to continue watching over the course of the year and talking about. I've loved what JT Toppin has done at Texas Tech. Another big-time sophomore performer, doing the same stuff that he did a year ago at New Mexico. But 23 and 9 on 70% from the field and shooting the three ball, attacking closeouts confidently, and also wreaking havoc on defense with nearly 4 stocks a game. It's been great. He may not be the most obvious NBA talent in terms of size and position. A little bit small to be a center, not quite skilled enough as a wing right now, but I'm willing to bet on his motor, his defense, and his production being something substantial, and right now he looks like a true top 40 guy to me, so definite credit to him. You always want to see dominance from the older guys, and this next guy is the embodiment of that early on. That's Alex Karaban. He's the head of the snake on this UConn team and has been absolutely lights out. He put up 11 blocks in his first 2 games. He's been knocked down from 3. The team defense is still there in a big way. Looks a little bit more spry and marginally more comfortable with the ball too. So I've been impressed, to say the least. I don't think that he's a completely different player, but he's gotten better, and the stage is set for him to lead this team and really run through what looks to be a fairly weak Big East and make another deep turning run. So I like what I've seen from him. He'll likely be in the first round of the next board. And then finally, Colin Murray-Boyles. I do need to catch up on that Indiana game because he had 2 points fouled out. That's probably the worst game of his career. But before that, he was producing very well. Still not shooting a 3, which is a little bit disappointing, but everything else was there from what I had seen. So he's someone I still like enough. I'm just interested to see what else he shows this year because I think there are some very real questions for him still to answer. And a couple other performers we won't talk about in detail, but shout out to them. Ryan Kalkbrenner, Adu Thiero, Cedric Coward, Ryan Conwell, Chaz Lanier, Walter Clayton Jr., RJ Lewis, Zeke Mayo, and the Visage twins have all shown different things. We could have talked about them in this pod as well. But we are starting to run a little bit short on time. So we'll go ahead and get into the sleepers segment. I don't know how often we're going to do this, but I do like to take the time to talk about some of those guys who may be unheralded and have the opportunity to become prospects, whether it is a year from now, 2 years from now, the end of their career, or even be more of a two-way guy and not like a potential first-round pick in the end. That's kind of the goal with highlighting these sleepers. A couple years ago when we did the first impressions, Brandon Podziemski was one of those guys that we highlighted. I think in the past that would have been somebody like a Tyon Grant Foster, or who are some other examples? Let me think. I'm not sure, but there have been other examples in the past that I think we would have talked about. So this is what that'll be for. That first guy for this is Jacob Kofi out of Virginia. Now, he won't be a sleeper for long because he's quickly put himself into future NBA talks with his start. He's a 6'9" forward who has been a menace defensively, showing versatility, great help instincts, and put up great stocks numbers in the process as well. And I think his production offensively, just as an athlete and outside shooter, has made him intriguing on that end as well. He's a definite guy to watch. And if he continues to shoot it and make plays within flow in the way that he has, I'd see a first-round pick. If you follow the draft, he's definitely not a sleeper to you. You guys who are up to date on things know that people have started to talk a little bit more about him. But to everyone else, and those of you who might follow the NBA more often, he's a definite guy to keep tabs on. Miles Byrd out of San Diego State is another guy that I'll put into our sleeper segment this week. He unfortunately went down with an ankle injury and missed a couple games, but that first game against UC San Diego was a definite head turner. At 6'6", 6'7", he's an intriguing guard/wing in his junior year. He's a big-time shot maker. He was extremely active defensively, putting up 9 stocks in that game, and he got pretty much wherever he wanted on the floor as a smooth lefty. He's actually playing Gonzaga tonight. The game is going on right now, so when this comes out, you'll know how that went. I'll actually check live on the pod to see what he's up to right now. Because Gonzaga is a big-time opponent. You guys saw what they did to Baylor. But right now, he is not having the greatest game. You know, the point still remains. He's coming off that ankle injury. We'll see what he's able to do. But he should be a big-time contributor for the Aztecs. That first game was great. And if those pieces are there in any capacity, in a real way, he'll be firmly in draft conversations. These last two guys, we've got Robert Hinton out of Harvard. He's a freshman. He's another big-time guy producing for them a year after Malik Mack. But I think Hinton has even more upside in terms of NBA potential. He's a 6'4", 6'5" guard who has been a supreme slasher, getting wherever he wants against the competition, and also has the skill set to get to pull-ups and make plays in several different parts of the floor and in and out of the pick and roll. He's not the greatest athlete, nor is he a great defender, at least from the film in these first couple games, but he's got good size, and when you're a freshman with this type of start, it's hard not to be intrigued by his long-term upside, even with the less than stellar game against Northeastern the other night. So I've been impressed by him. I'm interested to see like what else he's able to do and how he continues to grow as the game plan becomes more surrounded around what he's doing. He's one of those guys, whether it does ultimately mean transferring to like a high major or being a potentially maybe a one and done best case scenario, he's somebody that I would definitely write down as someone to follow. Last guy we'll talk about is Maxime Reynaud out of Stanford. He's got a really intriguing skill set as a big on offense. He's putting up 21 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals in his start to this season. He's a 7-footer who can shoot the three, moves pretty fluidly. Still a lot of questions on where exactly he plays, given he's not a great athlete, but he's also not super physical as a 5 for the next level. But I like what he's done so far. I think that his skill set with the ball and production around the rim have been impressive. And again, it's another one of those things where if this holds in any real capacity, I think he's definitely a guy who's at least intriguing and should be a guy to watch this year as a senior for Stanford. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had for this pod. I wouldn't really add anything else other than these shirts are, coming out very soon. Definitely be tuned into the channel and all the social outlets to be up to date on everything that's going on with that. Hopefully you guys mess with them. I think that there's also a yellow, actually they'll be on the screen. You guys will probably have already even seen them the first time I talked about them, but yeah. I'm really excited for these to drop. Hopefully we'll have some guests coming on the pod so it's not just me talking in the future episodes. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for watching, listening. Be sure to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave a 5-star review if you are on Spotify, Apple, all those outlets. Definitely would be appreciated. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. As always, I'm Keandre. This is HoopIntellect. Until next time, I'm out.